Welcome to On Microsoft. Conversations and tips from IT pros and developers across a wide range of Microsoft programming, systems, and software issues. You can access related resources, recommended reading, special offers, and more when you visit the On Microsoft Resource Center at informit.com/Microsoft Center.
How is Surface development sort of feeding back into some of the other things that Microsoft is doing?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's borrowing from WPF and XNA in order to have a model that developers are familiar with. But, you know, there's been rumors, there's been speculation, you know, Microsoft is working on a, you know, the courier book style device, and there's been all sorts of speculations around smaller kinds of, you know, Surface units and blah, blah, blah. How are you guys seeing Surface sort of influencing the rest of the company's development and so forth? You mentioned the touch stuff before.
Yeah. We all talk, right?
Yeah.
So as big an organization as it is, with a lot of the touch development that's going on across the company in whatever form it takes, these groups are talking to each other, whether it be on the development side or on the visual design side.
Yeah. On the developer side, let me give you some examples of what's happened. So Surface has been building on top of and extending WPF for 4 years now. And then Win 7 has announced that they have multi-touch, right? That's now released. The WPF team knows that, hey, Surface is over here, and they've been building really good touch APIs and controls that look and feel a lot like our mouse and stylus APIs, and we need to have a Win 7 story. So what we're working on right now is really getting parity across, using WPF4 to get parity across how you would program against Win 7 touch and Surface touch.
Okay.
So a lot of the stuff that we've been doing in Surface, we're actually transitioning that into WPF4 directly, right? You can see that in the Beta 2 release that's now out, where their touch APIs map almost one-to-one with what we've had in Surface.
To the point where if I learn some of the WPF4 touch API stuff, I could, and again, correct me, you know, either A, I'm learning the same concepts, or B, I can actually just take the code and recompile it straight?
So you won't be able to recompile until the next version of Surface, which is when we will change our stuff to build on top of WPF4. But once we get there and we're built on top of WPF4, then yeah, it's really a recompile, maybe tweak some of your design to leverage the objects and the multi-user kind of stuff. Right now we have really good consistency across concepts. And that's not just with WPF. So Silverlight 3 has touch APIs that have shipped now. And those are modeled a lot like how we did touch for XNA developers, where it's a frame-based model where you call this get state method, and it tells you here's everything that's there.
So just sort of as sort of a wrap up, sort of a closing thing. You know, obviously there's got to have been a lot of creativity from developer community that you guys are seeing sort of fed back to you, either through case studies or through people building examples or samples.
We actually have a contest going on right now, which is just about to wrap up, where partners, developers, seeing people of all shapes and sizes of developers coming out and building applications for Surface. The prize is winning a Surface, so. But a lot of stuff that really surprises us. You know, they think in ways outside of our own walls that are just amazing.
So give me your top two favorite, or better yet, one from each of you. What's your favorite, like, oh my God, I never thought we could do that kind of example?
Well, never thought we could do that. I don't know. I would say one of my favorite applications from a sweet spot perspective was one of our first, which was the Harrah's drink ordering app. I don't think it's the best from a user interface perspective, but from what the environment really represents, I think that's a real sweet spot for Surface. Because you're talking about people who are sitting in a bar. Surface isn't the central point of their discussions. You're not sitting there talking about Surface. Playing games is not your focus for being there. Interacting with each other. But you don't want to distract too much from that in doing your drink ordering and complaining that the waitress isn't there fast enough. And that's a really good spot within an environment. You know, we're not out to replace the waitress. We're not out to replace the salesperson. Augment. You know, so I think that's from a real what is really good about the applications. I think that's a good
very
example.
subtle yet powerful way.
Yeah, I think
to
it
do
is.
some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite? I mean, aside from this, we've heard the subtle.
Yeah.
Now
I can
give
be
me
more
the
geeky.
eye-popping.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
So on the geekier side, a more recent example that I really like, something that took advantage of the cameras in our system. There's a university that builds a leaf recognition application. Right, you find a leaf.
Leaf.
Yeah, you find a leaf that's
Like
fallen
from
on the
tree.
ground. Yeah,
It's not
from
as
a tree.
sexy as, but
Yeah, let's go back to the bar drinking. No, seriously, leaf.
You take a leaf, right? Pick it up off the ground. You set it down on the surface, and then there's this application that's written by a university where they look at the raw images that are coming from our cameras, find the outline of the leaf, and mash that up against their database, and they can tell you what kind of plant that leaf came from.
Wow. That, as I start thinking about that, I mean, that's got some really interesting scientific type applications to it. And,
as well as primary school education. I
Right,
mean, you think
right.
about kids who go out in the schoolyard and they go collecting leaves, right? And they bring them in. They could set it down, and the computer might set an array of possible answers that this might be, and say, know that the correct one is one of those options,
Right.
and say, hey, why don't you pick what it is? And maybe multiple kids can be picking and working together around that. So I mean, there are things like that,
Yeah.
all the way up to the higher education. That can
Now, are the cameras on the surface strong enough to be able to detect the patterns on the leaf, like the actual texture of it, or is that maybe a V2, V3 kind of thing?
The resolution's not quite that high,
Okay.
but it's definitely good enough to recognize like the outline of it and some of the basic features.
Okay, well, guys, I definitely want to thank you for coming by and chatting about this stuff.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
Future plans around Surface, just real quick. I mean, are we going to see a distinct V2, or is it going to be sort of quiet incremental improvements?
Well, let's talk about our PDC session maybe.
Okay,
'Cause
sure,
that's
go for it.
Because Robert's going to be speaking with Doug. Oh, wait, no, who are you? I'm going to back it up.
Yeah.
It's usually the Robert and Doug show. So
Yeah.
So, are there anything new coming down in terms of the surface space? Are we going to see a distinct V2, V3, or more subtle changes?
let's talk about our PDC session, because
Okay,
I think
go
that's
for
the
it.
next part that people are going to be really looking forward to. And Robert's going to be there.
Yep.
And his talk is really about Surface as well as with Win 7, right?
Yeah, so we'll be talking in great detail, lots of examples and demos and APIs about how we're aligning with the WPF4 team and
Okay.
Windows so that developers can reuse their learnings and in many cases their code across these platforms. And maybe hinting a little bit about what's coming in Surface V next.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming by.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
good luck with everything.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having us.
Thanks for podcasting with us. Remember to visit the On Microsoft Resource Center, where you can access recommended reading, special offers, and more at informit.com/Microsoft Center. Be sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single episode. Brought to you by Inform IT, the trusted technology learning source.